Hey, welcome to Happy Hour at the Old Timer Tavern. I am one of your two hosts, Lantern Noir, aka Rob, and I am joined by the amazing Greybeard Tavern, as is always the case on Tuesdays. Um, Out of curiosity, because you brought yours up, what are you enjoying for our happy hour?
Oh, I have Coke Zero and bourbon. Uh,
Ooh.
and eventually, after I get down a little more, I have a tendency to put some White Claw with lime or something in it. Only because I have the White Claw. I would not normally use an alcoholic beverage as a mixer for my other alcoholic beverage, but
But you do what you gotta do sometimes.
sometimes you just you gotta do what you gotta do.
That was actually I have like a half a shot of Jack Daniel's apple whiskey I have to use up because I didn't dump the last of the bottle into dinner last night. We did onion, sausage, and apples,
Oh,
and the only apples
nice.
we had were Red Delicious, so it didn't cook down into a good. And my wife goes, "Well,
Yeah.
how about some hard cider?" And I'm like, "I don't know. We found the apple whiskey." I'm like, "Ooh, well, it's just us and the 13-year-old. So if he gets a little toasted on this, it's not the end of the world. He's not going
Uh,
anywhere."
if you cook it, a lot of the alcohol cooks out. So,
I think that's a myth alcoholics tell themselves.
Just a little for the sauce, a little for me, a little for sauce.
Yep. This is actually, and this is up in your neck of the woods,
Hmm.
Ironfish Distillery. Whiskey
Oh.
aged in a maple syrup barrel.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Yes, I will. I even if they did ghost me when they were supposed to come on my stream to talk about the nature of distilling,
Yeah.
I will still plug their products because A, Michigan, B, good.
Be nummy. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Oh man. Yeah, we used to we used to make pear wine all the time because we
Ooh,
had the pears and I I can't eat raw pears, and my little brother wouldn't eat raw pears, and we were living with our dad, and so he was like, well, I'm not letting all those pears go to waste. So we used to take the pears and crush them up and make pear wine. So yeah, up north, man, up north.
oh yeah, well that absolutely works. So cool. Um, the topic I was thinking about this week as our big before we hit the topic, what's been going on with you with D&D? Let's catch up a bit because
For sure.
you run a couple of games, don't you?
So it right now I'm in two streamed game. I've cut back to two streamed games. I really literally I cut back to two streamed games. My stream on Sunday mornings for a couple hours playing video games, and then I play with the oldest daughter of mine. We play a game, just me and her, and then I play on Saturday nights. I play in a game with some college friends offline, or off
Stream.
streaming, just online. I play a game with them that I wrote back in 91 or 92, and we're playing that, and it's set in Morocco in 1913, and it's got this Indiana Jones
It's like
sort of.
Casablanca vibe. It sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly it. And there's all this supernaturally good stuff underlying, and people are like, that's preposterous. And then we see monsters and kind of thing. The problem is that the system I wrote is very real. Like, people move, if you are the best runner in the world, you are no better than, you know, like a Jesse Owens or whatever. It's a very the people are real, the monsters are monsters. And so, when you take on a monster or whatever, for instance, my guy got shot last week, and he got shot once, and that was pretty much he was he was
Got it.
shot.
That kind of a system.
Yeah, exactly. Very Cthulhu-esque.
Yeah. Well,
So
those can be a ton of fun if everyone knows going in that
yeah.
that's the story they're getting. You know,
Yep.
that you have the storylines where somebody goes, you can be the swordsman in Indiana Jones is one style of gameplay. And then there's the Boromir death where it's
Yes.
like, okay, a couple more hit points, a couple more hit points, a couple more hit
There,
points. I still got 3 left.
there's a ancient dragon magazine cartoon where there's a massive barbarian. He's tied to a tree and he's just covered in arrows. And there's a sergeant standing there with a clipboard, and it's like he's still got 17 hit points, you know. And there's like 3 little archers, like, you know, standing 2 feet away from him with short bows. That is, oh my gosh, you know.
Oh Lord. Well, that happened to a friend of mine. I took him to a LARP for the first time, and he's an engineer, and he'd done role playing games, but he'd never done a LARP. And the poor dude, like we gave him the basics of the rules, and he was new, so he said, "We need an NPC real quick. Here, be this brigand coming to town." He's like, "Okay," and they said, "You have 15 hit points or whatever it was," and he kept calling GameStops to do the math to see how many hit points he had left. And it was like, at a certain point, I'm like, dude, you just go down. They've probably gotten to your total. No, I think I've got like 4. Wait, well, how much damage were you doing again? Because you hit me 3 times, and I'm like, oh my God, Bob. Oh my God.
It's supposed to be fun. I taught a gentleman who he's probably in the like 180 plus IQ range. We taught him how to play D&D, and it was very interesting because you know those black and white composition notebooks?
Yep.
He had one.
Nice.
And to know what was in that, I looked one time. Every roll, every hit, everything he did in every session, all the mechanics were written out. He wrote them all out. It was insane. And so he knew like weird statistical, you know, he did the math basically. And it was just a different experience to play with him because he was gonna win D&D, you know. And so it was a very, very different style of play.
Both disturbing and beautiful at the same time.
Yes.
Like, I have a hard time getting my players to write down the names of the people in town. Which, to be fair, hang on, let me find my Google Doc. I did not make their lives easy. I should have just told them. Here, by the way, is a list of names you should become familiar with as they come up. There's a little space for you to write down why you know them, but you don't need to memorize the names themselves. Just look at the cheat sheet.
After, I think we're over 2 years now in a home campaign I was running like here with the guys that we're now playing my other system with. For like 2 years, this guy was a castellan for my brother's character, and no one knew his name. Every time I said, "Oh, Giles shows up," blah blah blah, they all just it's just that blank look. It took them forever to remember even that one NPC that they dealt with constantly. You know?
And his name was Giles.
And his name was Giles. Yeah.
You see, there is no excuse on that. My players are trying to manage names like Sir Ansgar von Ebervich, Warden of Ermestadt,
See,
and his recently deceased wife, Lady Chardelana von Ebervich, and their daughter, Lady Astrid Angernova von Ebervich.
I'm sorry, I would play an idiot in your campaign. I would play literally someone who'd been like completely beamed in the head way too many times, and it'd be like, that lady.
Yeah. Well, the good news though is like you get the first name right, we're good to go. If you can remember their entire noble title and possibly even go the extra mile of being able to interpret it, that gets you bonus points. Because I'm taking my cues from Ravenloft. I'm hard coding a lot of neat stuff into my NPCs, which I've been working on this campaign. It's in short story form. And then I don't know if you saw today, but they're going to be releasing the Candlekeep Mysteries.
Oh, yeah. It's like all aflutter out there right now.
17 mini adventures. And I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I need right now.
Do you have Yawning Portal?
I do.
Yeah.
But I don't like the fact that there's no connections between them. So it feels a little weirder to the way I like to think about like the Sunday night stream. Like I really want that ongoing. Yes, there are different characters every so often, but you still have that arc.
Yeah.
It's like Next Generation, DS9, Voyager. They're all.
Yeah.
Although I do, like I said, the Tales. Oh, maybe I don't. I know I've looked at it because it's got some classics in it that they reskinned.
Yes. Yep.
And
that's what I. Oh,
go ahead.
And that's what I've done with it. I've just picked one and been like, I know that, 3 of the 4 players in my old home campaign, I'm like, I know at least 2 of these guys have played this, but let's see if they remember it. And then, you know what I mean? And then I'd make some twists and changes. And for instance, when Tomb of Annihilation came out, I was like, wait a minute, this is oops, cats. This is why can't I think of the module now? Basically it's Tomb of Annihilation, which was a convention module, and wow, I can see the cover, dinosaurs, blue.
Oh, Isle of Dread.
I'm like, this is just Isle of Dread with Tomb of Annihilation in it. and I was so mad for so long about that. And then all of a sudden, then at one point, I think it was Crawford said, we took some of this and some of that and put it together. And I was like, aha, I knew it. And so then I totally forgave him. But then I had already been setting up Isle of Dread for my players to play, but I called it Monster Island. And there's a Tarrasque that they don't know, but they're going to release the Tarrasque later on, and it'll rampage around the island, and it'll become like a feature. Like it'll be moving around the island, and they'll just be like, gotta run, getting out of the way of Godzilla.
There. But where's the Tarrasque? Oh yeah, you're right. We should go there later. We'll wait till it's slept off and moved on a little bit. As such things do. So that's good to hear. We had our Sunday night game went much better than the previous. I ended the session before this one. They had one major combat, and they got their clocks cleaned in it. And then they never quite got to they got some more exposition, but not a win. And so last night they got they're back to gain that's right. We generally win combats. It's a matter of how closely we fail to win. And unfortunately we ended on a cliffhanger, and there's a part of me that's looking at my notes and like, this is going to happen this week. This is going to happen that week. This is going to happen next week. And I didn't plan for another combat encounter in this planning module I have. So I have to decide, do I still actually make them fight those giant spiders? Or do we just say, and that happens off camera, and we're back in town, and everyone's lost 10 hit points, move on? Like, how interesting is that fight going to be for the time it's going to take? And hey, Floofy, welcome aboard. Ooh, we have to be careful. She's brought powerful spells for health after battles.
All right.
We'll take it. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you hanging out with us as we talk old school D&D, which actually kind of segues into the topic that came up as we had not yet planned something for this week. And a thing came down one of the Facebook groups I'm in where somebody was complaining that they had just a really bad night of DMing. He's like, we quit early because someone had to leave for work, and then we all just kind of left, and I felt bored, and my players looked bored, and I thought, well, what happened? He said, well, we had this one big combat, and it was just boring. I was like, all right, and that sounds like this week's topic. How to keep combat interesting when, I don't know, if you look at the rule book, it's not terribly interesting. You declare an action, you roll some dice, you declare a result, and you move on to the next combat round.
Yeah, I used to always say that D&D D&D was Fred Flintstone combat. Bonk, 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 bonk. I hit you, you hit me. Bonk, bonk, bonk,
Oh my
bonk.
gosh,
And
yes.
that's really what what it's like, because one of the things is that you I always say, the barbarian down to 1 hit point hits just as hard when he's at 112 hit points, and so that's part of that is, you take these horrendous hits, but it doesn't affect anything. So you can expound or describe these beautiful maneuvers and wow, flying through the air and a kick and a ja and all that, but it really just takes a number off. There's no consequence to the getting hit. You take an arrow in the chest. Yeah, well, I keep fighting just as well as I did
Yeah,
without the arrow in the chest.
and that's been kind of like a staple of Dungeons and Dragons compared to other rule systems, because I'm thinking about Shadowrun, which had a very, like, you had your damage bars. Everyone had 10 squares on it, and as you filled the squares up, you started taking penalties. And if you were hardy, you still had your 10 hit points, but it was just harder to fill the squares in. So you still had that factor, but it added in the complexity of, oh, you are nearly on death's door. You are not going to be fighting, and you're not going to make that last second pistol shot to save your hide. You can't see very well anymore. You've lost so much blood. And that's something Dungeons and Dragons has never really. I want to say maybe there was an optional rule in one of the Unearthed Arcanas at one point. They flirted with it, but it never caught on.
Yeah, there's always been homebrews and dragon articles and stuff, and crit charts that give impairments and whatnot. I had in I would say, yeah, back in, this would have been late 80s, early 90s. I had a brutal critical hit and critical failure. It was a D4, and it went something like 1 was +1 damage, 2 was double damage, 3 was like an incapacitating wound, and 4 was save versus death or die. And, yeah, and people, my players hated it. They just hated it. I by sheer chance, I one time with a guard, just a castle guard, I killed 2, I think they were 7th or 8th level characters.
Wow.
just by amazing, weird, coincidental dice,
Yeah.
So it just was like, save or die, dead. Save or die, dead.
Well, but depending on the world that you've created for the story, like the rules of the story that players are in. Because there's Tolkien and there's Martin, and those are two different stories with very different rule sets to the universe. A guard can just as easily kill 2 major protagonists as anybody else. Now, Tolkien would probably be sitting here going, you don't know how to write a decent epic. I can't understand you. And Martin's like, yeah.
He's got a knife. There's an amazing game out there. It's one of my favorites. It's called Harnmaster. And Harnmaster is one of those games where, Sir whoever, the knight, comes into the kitchen, and the kitchen boy is standing over the dead cook with a butcher's knife, and the knight is in his nightshirt. That story goes, whoa, put the knife down, boy, right? Whereas if it was a D&D character, the D&D character would walk in his nightshirt and be like, it's a dagger, 1d4, peasant. He might be +1 to attack. I'm a 5th level barbarian. I've got 78 hit points. And he would snap the kid in half and take the knife from him and shake him around and huck him to the wall. And so, like I said, it just changes the story and the feel, The knight is probably going to get that knife away from him in Harnmaster, but you could take a shot to the gullet, or the kid could get lucky, that kind of thing. So,
well, and that speaks a lot to the abstractness of D&D hit points. I know I forget a lot. I know a lot of times when my players will roll a hit, I describe it out as you have connected and you have inflicted a wound. But really, D&D hit points have always intended to be a very abstract combat ability. And I think one way maybe to breathe life into a combat that feels like it's dragging is to get away from the nickel and diming on the hit points and get into the storytelling aspect of how are these two people maneuvering against each other in a way that one of them knows they're getting closer to losing the combat.
Yeah, ting ting, like a book. You're like ting ting ting. Oh no, he's got me on the ropes. I'm I'm against the wall, or
yeah.
So there are some things out there for 5th ed. One is set damage. Another one is having the hit points of monsters. And in from 4th edition, and I can't remember what they call. I think they called them minions, but there was another game, Spirit of 76, where they called the minions. They called them popcorn. Like one hit, a single hit to a henchman. They get popped in the jaw and they go over the rail. And
well, that was 7th Sea did that. Yeah. With I think they did call them minions, and it was you were intended to take out. Like, you would declare how many you were dropping. No, brutes. It was brutes, because a group of brutes was a brute squad. And you would determine how many brutes in a squad you were going to attempt to take on at once.
Yeah.
And that would determine the difficulty of your roll, is how far you were going to push it. And the logic there was to encourage the players to play a little pressure luck game with their dice. Like, okay, I think I can take 4 of them. Because there was no like, oh, you only took 3. Darn, it was like, you failed to take all 4. Now you have to deal with the blowback of 4 guys ganging up on you.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That game system too also had what we called exploding dice. So if you ever rolled a natural 10, you would re-roll it and continue to roll until it wasn't a 10. Which is how in one campaign, my wife's character, while tied up, ankles and wrists, with a bag over her head, in the back of a carriage at full speed through Argyle, was able to take out 5 of her captors. Yes,
flying fighting.
She just kept rolling 10s, and the story worked out where we were following on horseback to save her, and like these bodies just kept flying out of the carriage.
Have at you.
And we get up there, and she's got the bag. She goes, "Well, it took you long enough." But so, okay, I have a question. How does the set damage make, because I'm confused on, how does set damage make combat more interesting? I'm assuming you mean this hit does 5 damage. How does that, how do you see that breathing life into combat?
It just speed. Just speed. That's like basically all hits do max damage, and then crits do double damage. Bam, just said and done. You don't roll for damage dice. You just and it just speeds combat up, because I'm the barbarian. I get 12 plus my plus 6, 18 damage when I hit with my two-handed sword or whatever. It's just going to be 18 damage. So I hit a goblin with my broadsword, or where's it at? My orcish blade. I get a goblin. He explodes. Done. So, and like I had said originally, when we were doing 5th ed for the first time, I was so excited because the damage output and stuff just looked tremendous. But then they raised all the hit points of the creatures too, and I was just like, "Oh, you're killing me! You're killing me!" But you take the good, you take the bad.
He absolutely has all of the necessary props for this show. I'm just here to look handsome, and that's a stretch for me. I'm already pushing my envelope with that requirement.
You push me in a direction, man.
Yeah, but no, and that's an interesting one, because I've been experiencing as a DM lately, not being that versed in 5th, that my players are putting out way more damage than I expect.
Mm.
But that's the kind of thing too that comes from knowing the system and being used to it. I think like the set damage rule, I
Mm-hmm.
also think there's a value in getting your, if you're working at an actual physical table, getting your players used to the, for combat, you roll damage dice and hit dice in the same throw. So like I'm going to attack with my longsword. Here's my d20 for the attack roll. Here's my d6. Chuck.
Mm.
And that way you report to the DM, I hit armor class 17 for 8 damage.
Yeah. Yep.
And what that'll do is that will also speed things up, because all the DM has to do is process, is it a hit? Yes, apply the damage, move on.
Yeah. Some of the other things that out there for like speeding up combat, let the players do the math on the creatures, so they add up the damage that has been done, so that the DM doesn't have to then go, okay. That's what I was doing for a while. Was I was adding the damage, because addition is easier than subtraction.
Yep.
And I would just be like, it's 115 hit points. They are now at 78. They are now at 82. They are now 115. But then to have the players add it up, and then just call out, okay, they did, because then they can pay attention to each other. Write it down. Oh, you did 15. Okay, they're at 78. That kind of thing.
It reminds me of a phrase I've heard in teaching, which is, if there's something that the students can do, you should not do it for them. And I've used it a lot, especially with this online teaching, where it's like, oh, I really want to find a really good video on dilations, like how to do a mathematical dilation, how to do the ordered pair stuff, how to get the coordinates to work. And I started in, I'm like 10 minutes in, and I think, why the heck am I taking away a great 30-minute activity? Because next day in class, I'm like, okay, guys, here's a whole bunch of PowerPoint slides that are blank. Each of your groups is going to take one slide. I want you to go find me 4 videos within your group that talk about dilation. It has to include ordered pairs, and it has to include a visual example. And I want it on your PowerPoint slide. You got 10 minutes, go. And
Nice.
And then I'm not doing all that work. All I have to do is evaluate them. And welcome, GSP, SG. Welcome to hang out with us today. Sir.
And
oh, I'm sorry. That's not right. It should be over on this side. I should be tabletop and on the brim of my glasses now.
So for Floofy Girl, what do you mean I don't have a creased knife?
He's got all of them back there. By the way, I just threw in chat a link, and I will never stop using this website until they take it down, because it is like the bomb diggity of speeding up combat management. And what I love about it, this is the best part. There's a link on it. There's a bunch of little guys. It's a pop-out player view. So the players see the initiative order. They see all the monsters in it, and they have monster status.
Nice.
But they don't have a hit point total. That's on the DM view. So I can tick off the damage going in, and when it passes halfway, it then announces to the players it's bloodied.
Nice.
And then when it gets to like 3/4, there's another level of, it's healthy, it's injured, it's bloodied. And so they can start to like use that to guide what's going on, and it saves me the headache of having to do a lot of math, because it's just, you click on the name of the creature, and it by default says, how much damage would you like to apply?
Oh, sweet.
So it's really fast. And and from the player side, if I roll an attack roll for a monster and then I roll damage, it puts that number on the clipboard. So when I click on the player's health, it automatically is prepared to apply it.
Oh.
So I mean, it is so ridiculously fast.
And they can see that as it goes.
Yep.
Oh, that's amazing.
The player view always keeps the current, whoever's initiative order is up at the top, and they can look down the list to go who's next, because that's the one thing I have to communicate to my players. We have 1.5 spellcasters. We have a wizard and a paladin.
Yeah.
And I adore Nebula. She is an amazing person, but I have to get in the habit of reminding her that her turn is coming up and she should start looking at her spell list.
Yes, yes.
Um,
I have now added that to my posty forest. So improvedinitiative.com. It will be uh, added in.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
The
she is a trooper. She's not a D. She has not played D&D since college, and she and her husband dove right back in on this. But that is one thing I work better at as a DM is to get in the habit of saying, by the way, you're number 3 in the order. You want to start looking because my fighter is quick, my ranger is quick, my paladin is pretty quick. He tends to still be in the, well, I want to try to do this thing, and we all kind of like collectively figure out what rules we're applying to that because he's new to D&D, so he's like, well, I think this would be really heroic. Can I do this? Sure.
Sure. You certainly may try.
Oh God, the magic words of the DM. You're always welcome to roll for it. Which is actually what I, not to bring politics into things, but when everyone talked about what happened last week, my comment was, well, you always wondered what happened if you make a persuasion check and roll a natural 20. Or a perception check and you roll a natural 1. And you're like,
I think both of those happened last week on different sides of that situation.
Roll persuasion and see if you can convince the guard to let you go past into the halls of Congress. Bam, natural 20. And the DM goes, shit. Okay, wait. The guard gets to sense motive. He gets a sense motive check. He's going to roll wisdom. 1. Shit.
I'll just open this gate for you.
Yeah, basically.
Would you like a selfie on the way by?
But it's weird too, because I think only gamers would look at that and go, yeah, that could happen.
Yep.
We've had those moments.
Oh, the dice.
Oh, yes, indeed. So these are definitely things that speed things up. I know I've used, speaking of Post-it notes, I used to do that when I ran my game I used to run a game at a youth club. And I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it for as long as I did it. I don't regret quitting before the pandemic started because it was incredibly energy consuming. They were great kids, but I forgot what it's like to DM for 9, 11 to 14-year-olds. And with a boss who says there's no table limit in the group. There's no we don't have any more room for you. Figure out how to accommodate everyone.
Yep.
And with a group that couldn't self-DM.
Right.
So it was very exhausting, but they were great kids. I adored almost all of them. But I would do, I would put initiative, I put their names and their initiative number on a Post-it note, those little thin ones, and stick them on the back of my DM screen.
Yeah.
And then just go down the list. So it would be one of those, we go around the table with your initiative numbers, write them down, line them all up.
Yeah. The back before I started DMing off of my laptop and I had a DM screen, everyone had a card. It was basically a index card folded over with their little drawing or their name on the card. And just as initiative would come up, I would start, left to right, and I would line up the initiative. And I just had cards that said like minion or boss or spellcaster, and I would put them in the order, and so along the top of my DM screen you could see who was next. And now so that's to speed it up, and that will decrease your boredom in a big way. And never be afraid as a DM to just go, yeah, this is taking too long. Ooh, you got him. Just move on. Particularly if it's any kind of like a random encounter, because they just basically swept random encounters out of the way. I mean, like we were talking last week, it was like every X number of turns back in early editions, Mulvaney particularly, every so many turns you rolled for a random encounter. And it 1d6 skeletons. Blam! Why are there skeletons here? Because I rolled it.
Because there are skeletons here.
Yes, there are skeletons.
And even Ravenloft, which I hold up as one of the great, well-written, purposeful modules, had wandering monster tables. It was expected at the time, and they were logical wandering monsters, but it was still that element of random. I hold, if your combat's getting boring and you have random monster encounters in your campaign, you've already solved your boring combat problem.
Ah,
I
yes.
think that that's a sign. Although I also would say know your players, because I've met people that they'll figure out if you fudge the numbers and let them kill something too fast, and they will be upset about it.
Yes. Yes, there are indeed players like that.
Which they're probably not bored. Bonk,
Right.
bonk, 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 bonk,
Uh-huh.
bonk, because they want to see if the math works out.
Uh-huh. I bonk harder than they bonk and I will win.
Yeah.
And so they feel cheated if you're like, this has gone on too long. I got 3 players who are like, checking their phones or whatever. Uh-huh. I literally have over the decades, I had one guy who used to read a book at the game, which again, know your players. He because it felt insulting to me, but eventually I figured out that all he wanted to do was be there with everyone and kill things. That's literally what he wanted. And so, he was always ready on his turn. He always knew what he was going to do. He almost always played fighters. and it was just tank, blam, bonk, 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 my turn to bonk, your turn, bonk, bonk, bonk. And
Yep.
and he was attentive, but he just didn't care about the rest of it. So he would sit and read a book. Had another player who is still in my home game who to this day will sometimes kind of nod out. And it's just, we're all like 50 and it gets to be 9-10 o'clock. You're rounding out that end of session
9 o'clock,
stuff,
I'm half asleep.
and yeah, that's what I'm saying. It gets to be that 9-10 o'clock and he's used to all week, going to work and blah, blah, blah. So he's going to bed then. So yeah. So if there's not something that he's involved in, he just kind of, you could see he gets a little droopy, a little tired.
Yeah. Well, absolutely.
So,
That's a definite, you got to watch, you got to know your players. You got to know what's going on. I think I actually had a player who used to do needlepoint when we played. And that was how she kept her hands busy. And there's a part of me that's like, oh man, that's really like kind of disrespectful. And the next thought was, well, but she was always very attentive. And she's the kind that she needed that stimulation to stay engaged.
yes.
I tend to think like it's not a hard or fast rule, but I feel like around the 4th or 5th round of combat, something different needs to happen.
Yeah.
There needs to be a shift in the combat where, like, okay, we finally clear out the minions. We can focus on the boss now, or the boss appears, or the boss enters phase 2, or
Yeah.
I mean, I think we laugh a bit about the animes where it's like, this is not even my final form. And part of the reason that is there is to break up the combat and give something interesting to look for. Anime style, yeah, absolutely. You can show us you as a witch. That's all. I don't think I've seen any self portraits. Very swanky. I'm digging it. Very evocative, by the way, of another character we will talk about someday. My wife and I played 2 red-skinned mini demons in City of Heroes.
Oh, City of Heroes.
We were Bedlam and what was the other name? We couldn't get Chaos. It was something like that because Bedlam was available for whatever reason.
Bedlam and Mayhem or something.
Yeah, something like that. And we were both as small as you could make, female red-skinned demons.
Yeah.
We had so many characters on City of Heroes.
I remade in City of Heroes. I remade a character that I played in. We've always called it Face Rip, but it's Phase Rip. It's the old Marvel system from way from the 80s, and I remade my character Extreme, and so he was just a big thumpy lug in that game back in the day. You rolled everything random, and I literally had 1 power, invulnerability. I had great stats, I had great health and great strength, and invulnerability, but that's all that character had. So he was extreme, Meanwhile, a friend of mine was he rolled. It was I can't. It's like clairaudience, but it was for smell, and and then he rolled the power level on it, and we did the math, and he could remotely smell things on the moon.
Oh God.
Because it was like class E or class F or whatever the top was. So he could remote smell things on the moon. And so he decided he was going to play the last Thundarian, so
Why
he
do you
was
look disturbed? Neil Armstrong just farted.
exactly
What?
it. Yeah. Oh,
They eat shit up there. But I think going back to the keeping combat interesting, I think there's something about thinking of combat as how does it make the story interesting? Like, I think a lot of it goes to, are these monsters here because you want to create trash and you just want to slow the party down to give them some, I mean, it feels weird saying this out loud, but do you want to give them a couple of wins so they feel good about themselves before you crush their souls with the actual enemy? But that's part of like the art of storytelling. If you look at every great epic, the heroes almost always have a series of wins followed by their first real challenge, or a failure followed by subsequent wins. So you can kind of start to think, how does this combat impact the story, and how do I keep that moving in a way that's going to make that they're going to talk about later?
Right.
Because I think the Flintstone bonk bonk, no one ever sits down 10 years after the fact and says, that was a great combat. We wore the guy down. That's just, and sometimes you don't need that. The random 1d6 skeletons, that's there to just kind of wake the party up and suck up some of their healing spells. But if this is a combat that's there on purpose, like you should be aiming, if possible, to get the players to a point where 10 years from now, when they're thinking about your campaign, they're like, oh yeah, that combat, that was nuts.
Yep.
Or, like my wife and the carriage. I mean, that happened pre-children. So that anecdote is 15 years old now, and I still break it out.
Yeah. Yeah. The again, so part of the thing, like, it has become popular is, how do you do this? Like, when they take out someone, you let the player describe it. I like to foster, describe what you're trying to do, or even roll the dice and describe it, like, blam, okay, I got 15. Okay, you hit him. What is that like? Or how do you hit him? So that they get the, I upper swing with my morning star, or whatever. And I try to then interpret their actions and oh, you hit him here, you get him that with that. But like we were saying earlier, then that doesn't have an effect. It's not like you put the arrow through his elbow and now he can't use his arm, so he has disadvantage. It really is, it would feel better if there were things like that, but as math has proven, that kind of stuff always plays heavier on the players, because that monster is coming out fresh out of the box all the time.
Oh yeah.
And the rat chewed my Achilles tendon. Now I can't move as well because the rat happened to get a critical on me. Description definitely would help improve on the boring combats on player and DM side.
I did. That's for Keely's birthday.
So that's always a good one. Terrain, giving options in combat. Those are always good things to help liven it up. I played with these guys, and I used to call them like the battle board boys, because they wanted a battle board. They wanted Roll20, they wanted a map. They and the DM, bless his heart, was, he would go and put all the dynamic lighting into his Roll20 stuff. And so literally you would move your figure and you'd go around a corner and there would be the giant spider would be right there. And you'd be like, why did I move there?
And then the winning DM says, I saw your face. It gets a surprise round.
Yeah,
like,
there it is.
Don't tell me it doesn't have surprise. I watched you move your miniature.
Yeah.
And so that, yeah. And that's definitely, I mean, you can add a lot with that to beef it up. I think one thing that I've read is the sandwich rule. You have your bread, the meat, the bread.
Oh.
And so there should be description, the meat, roll your dice, and then follow-up description. And if you can put all three of those on your player, more's the better.
Yeah. Yeah. And so all you would say was something along the lines of, he's bloodied now. And then it would go back to the player to say, his armor is ripped and, he's bleeding from the chest or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Or even the case of they provide the bread, the meat, and then you top it with the last slice of bread. I'm going to do this. Oh, that sounds good. Roll the dice. The twist is, and this is why I've always struggled with as a DM, and even, 30 years later I haven't solved, is the how much I want to mechanically incentivize this. Because it does, I think it makes the combat more interesting, but you want to be careful about what you're creating an incentive for. Because one of the things that any economist will tell you, you get what you incentivize. So if you want the players to become narrators and you give them like a bonus to narrate, you'll get narration, but you might not get engagement.
Right.
You'll get the players going, it's expected of me to go the extra mile and say this. So I've got my script. I'll quickly roll a D6. Okay. I rolled a 3. So I'm going to dramatically upper slash with both hands, aiming for his neck. Dice. I rolled a 17. You want to kind of know your players.
Yeah.
Some players are not big on doing that. They just want to bonk, bonk, bonk because their engagement comes elsewhere in the game.
Right.
I like to DM for people that I don't like getting too into engage in the combat because I've had enough experiences over the years where it gets uncomfortable.
Oh, the gore effects and stuff like that.
Yeah, where players want to hear about intestine spilling. And at a certain point, I'm like, you all know those are just hot dogs and ketchup, literally, right? A little open pit barbecue sauce, and no one knows that it's,
The zombies.
Yeah, basically. And don't knock me, that is like Open Pit Classic is one of the best fake bloods you can use. Because not only does it look generally right, because it kind of browns, but it tastes good. So
I'll have to see if that's a recommended brand on like The Walking Dead or whatever, because that's a lot of it is pork or brisket and stuff that they do with that.
Can we totally tangent for a second?
Sure, I'm all good.
I was at the last time I went to Dragon Con, I was cosplaying as Herschel from The Walking Dead without the leg. I actually tied my leg up and slipped it into my pants. I got a little bit of grief from one friend who's like, you surely shouldn't have been faking that you didn't have a leg. That's very ableist of you. And I was like, I'm cosplaying. I think it's safe. And I came across a guy who claimed to be the man who was the extra that was the zombie that bit off Herschel's leg. Because we were in Atlanta for the convention. Right, and that's where they filmed around they filmed in Georgia. They filmed around the Atlanta area. So a lot of those people were extras. They were zombies. And it was like, I don't know if what you're saying is legit, but that's awesome. Ooh, Floofy, thank you so much for supporting the stream. We love having you along and being part of this. That is just awesome. And thank you for that. I can't quite read. I have to work out how to read my alerts when they come through Stream Elements. But I think it's every little bit counts. I mean, think of it this way. You're 1/60th of my microphone. And those add up. Don't get me wrong. And thank you. I didn't get a chance to say it because you mentioned it in chat. We were kind of rolling. But yes, the little Slimer down there next to my logo, who is now part of my logo, came from Floofy's sister. And it is one of my absolute favorite bits of graphic for it. Which ironically, I don't normally wear glasses,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been living in them because I live on a computer, and I apparently now need them for computers.
Got it.
So,
Um, it, did they subscribe or what was the
donation.
donation? So here's something. I don't know if you want to promote this, but when I'm on some shows, when people donate or subscribe, I got something I do for them that's special with my props. Would you
Oh,
like to see it?
I would. Okay, now we are technically a mature audience,
Yep.
but
Yep.
I generally keep things PG-13.
Yep.
If that's
No,
still,
this is fine.
if you can show it within that, like so we previous
All right.
conversation, I'm suddenly like, he just said, "Do you want me to show it?" And he gives me a chance to say no. Maybe this is a cue I should say no. Go for it. What have we got?
So generally, when someone adds a donation or whatever, I take this mallet and I hit that guy in the face.
Hit him.
Did you hear it?
Oh yeah.
Just for you.
Nice.
Thanks for the donation.
Hey. Oh, I'll file that one away. That's clever. We're gonna do that a lot. In fact, we might even talk Luffy into another one just so she can get in their bunk. But yeah, so every little bit counts and appreciate that. But going back to combat,
Yeah.
there's so much to be said about the knowing your audience, knowing your players, and again, I think the more things you can add to the combat that are not monsters, because you mentioned terrain, and the person who had been asking, this is the scenario he came back. He's like, I don't know, it was just everyone was really bored, and he gave me the scenario, and all I could think is, dude. The scenario was it was a group of goblins who had taken hostages that they were throwing down a pit into a giant spider nest.
Oh.
And the players were there to rescue the hostages. And my next thought was, well, you put a timer up. Every 3 turns, 2 of them are going to drag somebody to that hole, and they're going to keep doing it unless you can stop them. Like, there will always be 2 goblins whose action will be try to get a hostage into the hole.
Yeah.
And I could make that combat go for 17, 18 rounds.
Right.
And I think my players would still be pretty engaged because there's always something different to engage with. What do you think? What else could we add to that particular scenario?
Yeah, the timer, I mean, just the sheer fact that they would try to interpose themselves, in a way to defend the people would be an interesting thing, because you'd be like, okay, you're readying an action, okay, but now you got to make a dexterity check or something to, because these are goblins and they're weaving in and out and they're trying to get these people. I had one situation where there was a demon and there was a paladin, and the paladin would get close to the demon because he was trying to grab a book. The other people were all firing and fighting and melee, and the paladin just needed to grab the book. And he would grab the book, and as soon as he got the book, the demon would take over his brain because he had no wisdom or whatever it was, and so he would fail the roll, and he would be like, yes, here's your book, master. And then he would then be dragged away and get out of the range of the demon and be like, demon, and he would rush back in, and it happened round after round, like 4 rounds in a row type thing. So but it was fun because it was that, it was hilarious and good time. But yeah, putting timers in, putting situations in, like in descriptions, like, we're in the winery. Is there a pile of barrels somewhere? Is there a chandelier to swing from? Is there tables to flip over and hide behind? Again, it's terrain, but it's descriptive terrain.
Yep.
In some other systems, they suggest that when a player says that, it's yes and, is there a chandelier to swing from? Yes, and give me a roll to to swing on it.
Yes, and it's covered in slime. What do you think you want to try to do? Oh, I'm going to go for it. Well, and that's a rule I've always told my players is don't ask me for mundane stuff. If I haven't said it's not there, assume it is, and I'll stop you if I'm concerned.
Yeah. If it doesn't make sense or whatever.
Yeah, it's like, can I grab the sword from the rack on the wall behind the bar? Sure. I didn't mention the rack behind the bar, but now let's mention it. We're in a tavern. The guy used to be an adventurer. Yeah, he's totally got like a rack, like 4 racks of swords back there. He's collected. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so I take the Holy Avenger and swing it. No. Stop. You're what?
Just a moment here.
Of course, then I'm like, all right, sure. If you want to swing a Holy Avenger at a random thug, okay. But so there's that as an option to play off of. I also think, to bridge on your descriptive, I think a lot of players, especially newer players, need to see the NPCs do it first, and do it badly.
Right.
So like I'm thinking about the flip the table. You know, the goblins flip up the table and they take cover behind it. If they completely negate the attack, it sounds like the expectation the players will do it. But if they don't, now you've put it in the player's head that they might try it and maybe do it better. And so I think the more you kind of let the players know the rules of your universe through what the NPCs are doing in it, it can spur them, especially if they aren't screwed.
Right.
You don't want a player to say, well, I didn't know he could swing from the chandelier and cause me to go prone and then take advantage of me, get advantage on the attack and kill me. That's wrong. You don't want that. Yeah. But you do want the players to go, wait a minute, he did what? I am so doing that.
So again, to, let them be creative. For instance, one time on this DM, the module had a barricade, like a 3-foot tall barricade with kobolds behind it, and the hallway they had covered the hallway in caltrops. Okay. So my halfling monk took the paladin's tower shield and put it on the floor and just ran towards them, technically having full cover because the tower shield was like 4 foot by 2 foot or whatever, and he just snow plowed all the caltrops up to the wall, and then being a monk, he flipped, made an acrobatics roll, he's over the wall, chop, to the kobolds on the other side. And you could see the GM was just like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I hate you, but it makes sense. You could do it. Because then I ran up, slapped the tower shield up, and then ran up the tower shield, like a ramp. Yep. And he was like making acrobatics check. I like blam. Of course, I'm a monk and made it. So it, as a DM, you should never feel bad. You're writing the story together. You should always be like, yeah, that totally blew my plan apart. Yep, I expected this to be forever, but that was great. You got amazing. I would have never thought of that, and let them win.
And then I think to piggyback that, don't be afraid to be honest with the players, to say that was awesome. Never do it again. Because I'm thinking now, like, okay, I've been in campaigns where the first time the halfling grabs the tower shield, takes advantage of full cover, and does anything, means that every combat after that, the halfling is going to immediately reach for a tower shield to enjoy full cover. And that breaks the game, because now it's become a little adversarial, where the DM is like, okay, I have to plan around this thing that I let happen because it was cool. But now it's getting stale. Yeah. We would never see it again in an episode, something like that. How about we don't do that again? That was kind of what we said last time, where I said, the adversarial DM and player situation, where it was, the players would do something cool, and then the DM would then do it next week to the players. Like the guy created the ice wall above the orc army
like vertically in the air, and the ice fell and crushed
Foam.
the orc army. Of course, the next week the DM's like, I create a wall of iron above your characters, and blam, the whole hallway is smashed, and that is not how the game should be played.
No, and I think a lot of that, again, well, part of it is know your party. If
Mhm.
you've got players that they really have fun with, we're going to figure out how to break the system and make the DM break it back, by all means,
Right.
go with it. But I think a lot of times it comes down to the best D&D I've had over the years, the best role-playing games I've had over the years have been, we found a creative way to solve a problem, and then we all kind of understood we couldn't solve it that way again because that's boring.
Yes.
And you kind of need to, like many things, don't be afraid to talk to your players and say, look, this is just kind of how it works. You got to keep coming up with new solutions. There was a game of Vampire where one of the players said, well, my fangs are aggravated damage, right? And if you look in the rule book, fangs are aggravated or greater damage than traditional attacks because they're magical. And and she said, okay. And then we did a combat, and she went piranha on everything she saw. Everything was a grab and bite attack.
Yeah.
And I watched the combat happen. I'm like, wow, that was crazy. The street urchin, who happens to be a vampire, ripped apart everything. Okay, duly noted. Next combat, she does it again. And I'm like, I'm really struggling to give these guys interesting combat encounters because the little urchin goes fangs out, and then all hell breaks loose. And I had to sit down with her as a player and say, look, I think we need to change something here. It was really kind of funny the first time you did it. Second time was interesting, and now it's kind of breaking the game.
Yeah.
How do we approach this together so we keep having fun?
Yeah.
And bless her heart, she was so good about going, yeah, that felt kind of broken. And we negotiated out that she had to make a successful grapple check before a fang attack. And that suddenly her street urchin wasn't, the redcoats were much better at kicking away a street urchin before she could latch onto their leg with her fangs. But yeah, basically, you want to joke about ankle biters.
Mm-hmm.
You take a 14-year-old girl, make her a vampire, and then stick her fangs out on a bunch of redcoats. It gets kind of scary.
And there's different ways to do it too. I joined a campaign. This was in 3.5. I joined as a sorcerer, and I was a total pyromancer. It was all about fire. And eventually, because when I joined the campaign, they were structured such that they were taking, it was taking 12, 13 rounds sometimes for combats. And they were saying that literally via 3.5 rules, when you reached your constitution number in rounds in combat, you would then have to start making constitution rolls to continue fighting and stuff. And things. So they were saying that it was because there were two guys at the table who were all about the rules. They were really, really into the rules and stuff. So I joined, and combats were taking 2 rounds because I was a pyromancer, and things were just ridiculous. Fireball, 0.0 fireball, because again, the rules, I could put a fireball that landed right here at the edge of my, the edge of my fringe. Boom, fireball. So the DM, after that, the people that we were fighting specifically started targeting my character. In one of the last big battles, there was literally a rogue with a wand of magic missile, and his job in the combat was every round shoot the sorcerer. Kill the pyromancer. Plots against to take the pyromancer out. There were assassins after me. There were, the DM played it. He was a great DM because the world was the world, and it went on no matter what the party did. The party could spend 3 weeks drinking, Well, the plague that they were supposed to stop is now, taking 2 cities out because the players did what they wanted to do. Anyway,
As
yeah,
players do.
so like you said, talk to your players and just try to come to a compromise.
Yeah, and I think that going back to that's a whole. I think the player targeting is is a topic we should kick down the lines for another day, because that is a real issue that comes up with games where the DM figures out who the power players are, and they get if I don't target them, we have a problem. And what's weird is like 4th edition half fixed that,
Right.
because I've been running my game and I keep like wondering why anyone is attacking the paladin. The paladin has the highest AC. They're at 3rd level, so monsters are maybe getting a bonus of 3 to hit, which means they have a below 50-50 chance of hitting the paladin. But the other fighter, the brawler, they got a great chance against him. And so it becomes this weird, like, it's actually in their best interest to target him first, but that kind of feels weird because it's like, okay, why am I picking on him just because his AC is lower? And 5th edition kind of fixed that with the whole marking system, the taunt, if you will, because we had talked about on the forums, there had been conversation. Well, in 3rd edition, you could decide who you're going to attack, and that makes sense because the dragon's obviously going to attack the wizard first. It's like, well, yeah, but that kind of leads to some weird combat. But I think when it comes to keeping your combat from being boring, again, part of knowing your players and know if they want you to be like, okay, we got to keep the pyromancer safe. He's our ace in the hole. Keep him alive, because once they're all down to half damage, then we're going to open him up like a can of whoop ass. And but it gets into that. The thing you have to avoid is the bonk to bonk to bonk. That's like, I think the biggest thing is if you're doing that, if any time a player is saying, well, I rolled to attack the nearest blank, you're going to start to lose players.
Yeah.
Because they're not they're not invested in the moment.
Yeah, definitely that's where, like, again, story, description, give them things in the environment, time, make a time constraint, make that they have to, again, defend someone. You got 40 goblins. How are you going to protect, this merchant? For instance, I had werewolves fighting with my party, but it was night. Only one of the people in the party could see, and they had met up with a group of like sellswords or whatever. So there were these NPCs basically, and the werewolves would bound in, grapple, snag an NPC, and half movement drag them into the dark. And the party was like, nobody can see. Well, we can't go after them. And then my daughter, bless her heart, she's like, we have to. And she runs off into the darkness. And the party's like, no, that's what the werewolves want, And so then they started to split up, and then more NPCs would get grabbed and eaten, or they would tear in and bite the NPCs and leave them laying there screaming and run off into the wilderness, because they're werewolves. They're fast as heck, and they can see in the dark. So it was just, all around a good situational fight that made them have to think, okay, I cast a light spell on this. You guys stay here with this fighter. I'm going to go save this guy. They had to coordinate and really think about it,
Well, yeah. And that's a big part of it, is that, like, it's weird. You mentioned the Battle Board Bros. And in a lot of ways, I feel like the Battle Board is a real mixed blessing. There's something really nice in saying, okay, here's where everybody is. Here's what you can do, make a decision. And like, there's a ton of power in that, because the players aren't wondering, can I? They're like, I can see my options. I will now describe an interesting option. But I've also seen, and I think this was especially true in 4th edition because it was so easy to make a battle board, that in a lot of ways it became a board game.
Mm-hmm.
I can move 8 spaces and do a thing. And so everyone on their turn would pick up their mini, count 8 spaces, put it down, and then say, I bonk that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this thing about learning how to have that conversation with the players where we're going to battle board until you feel like you know what's rolling, and then we're going to take the board away because it's too easy to get wrapped up on how many squares is it, what's the range of my weapon, okay, here's the mechanics, I do the thing, I'm done.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I battle that with when I play board games with friends. There are a lot of games I'll play once, maybe twice, and it's like, you know what? It's a neat game, it's a neat universe, it's a neat mechanic, but it takes too long to get to my turn, and I'm bored waiting for my turn.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Rail games. I had my spouse and one other individual in our gaming group loved rail games. Could not stand rail games. I mean, literally, I'm like, everybody's turn takes 5 to 10 minutes. So by the time it gets to my turn, I'm like, crayon. Here's my money. Set my crayon down. Now I'm going to wait 20 minutes until it's my turn. I just, I don't have the patience for it.
Well, that gets into things like Firefly, the board game, is both. It takes 10 minutes for each player to take their turn, but if you play with the right people, you don't care because you're all laughing your backsides off on their turns.
Yes.
And so that's another piece.
You're engaged in their turns. That's because again, there's a joke, there's a reference, there's a thing. You're like, oh my God, okay, but then that changes the who goes next in the order. If it's the Firefly game I'm thinking of, because there's a couple of them.
There's a couple. I'm thinking about the Firefly, the board game, the original, like the big boxed with the big map of the universe.
Okay, where you fly around.
Yeah, it's kind of like multiplayer solitaire. Yeah. Really, it's like how fast can I finish my game of Firefly compared to you?
Yep.
But it's so chock full of references that the few times I've had a chance to play it with people, I haven't been bored waiting for my turn.
Yeah.
Even though I have no dog in any race on anybody else's turns.
Yeah.
Other than a teeny bit of, well, if you go there and hire her, I'm going to be pissed. I was going to go hire her. Because I want Kaylee on my crew.
Yes.
But I think that gets a little bit into that. If combat's getting boring, there's something to be said for looking at what your players are doing and what their engagement levels are to say, okay, is it viable to create a system where they're going to be narrating more so players can listen to each other, where they can riff off each other more, they can provide help to each other? How do we get them to not sit and do nothing for the 8 minutes between turns?
Yep.
Because if you figure each player is a minute onto themselves, that's at a standard table of 4 players, 1 DM. That's at least each combat. That's 5-minute gap. Yep. And even television has figured out you can't put advertising in front of people for 5 minutes and expect them to still be watching your channel.
Indeed.
In fact, I think YouTube caps out at like 2 minutes. So, well, yeah, because they know you're gonna flip the. Actually, my tolerance for mid-video ads on Facebook is exactly 0 seconds. Like, I feel so bad for so many content creators that I love. I love the Holderness family, but there's so many of their videos I've never watched all of because I get 45 seconds in and I get an ad from Facebook and I'm like, and I'm back to scrolling through political news.
I so bad that I paid for YouTube Red. That I give them the $12 a month and then it's painful to watch anybody else's YouTube. It's like the commercial. YouTube has commercials. I've been at it so long that I forgot.
I'm looking forward to the day that I have commercials because it means people are watching enough.
Yeah, that's true.
That somebody thinks they want to slap an ad on it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm still holding out for Avalon Hill because I think I'm doing a great job of plugging for Axis and Allies over here.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Fortress America.
Yep.
Samurai Swords.
Oh, all the good ones.
Do I have any other Avalon Hill right there in the pile? Not that I can see right off the bat, but yeah.
It would be nice if we could get a few bucks for that, guys.
We
We say nice things about you generally.
I will do a whole show on Avalon Hill if you want.
We can file that away for a later thing. It's not really, it's not D&D, but oh my gosh, so many memories of those games. But I think the biggest thing, kind of going back to where we started, which is the guy was commenting that his combat was boring and everyone left in a bad mood. And I think we started well on the biggest thing you want to think about, and that's that bonk to bonk to bonk combat. That is inherently boring, and you get maybe 3 rounds of it, and you need to do something.
Yeah.
So it can be change up the terrain. It can be change up the events. Another thing I pitched them is because he was talking about that they were throwing their victims down to the spiders. Okay, well, add a spider to the combat.
Yeah.
Like, my players are bored. Okay, and you see a spider crawling out of the hole.
But Jim Davis of WebDM uses the wave method. He says that, if it's getting boring or they're just winning the combat, add another wave. You just said, a spider comes out of the pit. Oh, there's a hallway right there. They've heard the combat. The goblins in the next room rush in. Now there's like 4 more goblins. Oh, we're gonna kill all the goblins anyway. But the druid, who was like, okay, I'm concentrating or whatever, now goes, ooh, I gotta stop those, entangle, and I think you're right. I think it's 3 to 5 rounds. Something needs to change. You can't go over 5 rounds without anything happening. The one goblin says, "I'll go get the master," and starts to run off, and so your party's like, "Oh snap, he's got to die."
I was going to say, in Assassin's Creed, that's a standard mechanic. When you attack a fort, somebody goes to call for backup, and it's like, I don't think I've ever had blood pressure spikes like I have in the moment that I see that little bell icon form, because then it's like, oh crap, he's got to die. And then like everything goes into whacking him. And those are the kinds of things that if you can communicate to your players, this is the thing you should be worried about. Suddenly there's that incentive to like change up. If you're worried the players are you're overwhelming the players, remind them that they have escapes. I think a weird thing I've noticed, and it's not wrong, I was pitching the things with my Banshee fight that we ran last week, or 2 weeks ago, when they lost, and they lost, and they were supposed to lose, and they all kind of knew, looking at the story arc, like, yeah, we were supposed to lose that, but we were so close to winning. Is make sure they know they can retreat.
Yeah.
Like,
I have literally, and this one, I like to do this with players who are playing smart or wise characters. I will sometimes, at the beginning of a fight, in the middle of the fight, wherever, I will say, hey, give me a wisdom check or a perception or an insight or something. And they'll roll. And back when we were at the table, I would just write them a note. You realize you cannot win this fight. And I would just give them the note, and they would go, oh. And so then they would role play, guys, I think we need to escape. And the paladin would be like, no, we'll stand to the death. And then the rogue's like, no, really, he's really smart. I think we should run.
He did go to school. None
Exactly.
of us else went to school.
Exactly.
We went to wizard school. Okay, but still.
Yeah.
Ooh, random thought. I did see a meme come down the line today that in your world, you should consider treating wizards like IT professionals and programmers. And things like, according to the code, this should work. If I wrote everything right, here's what's going to happen. What? I'm going to turn him into a newt. You're sure? Well, we'll see when I fire it, but that's what I wrote into the code. And then everyone takes a step back.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Which
Stand back, I'm doing magic.
I don't know why that popped in. Actually, I know why that popped in there. But that's the kind of thing too. I think we forget with our players how easy it is to just not help them envision what we envision.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we help them envision what we're seeing and we let them add to it, it just keeps adding stuff and it helps fight that monotony of bonk bonk.
Yeah. I literally am going to use the thing where, bam, they hit a goblin and I'll be like, the goblin stumbles back and he hits, he falls into the pile of barrels that are behind him, the stack of barrels behind him, kind of like nudge. There's a stack of barrels there, it may, just to give them those environmental clues as things go by, because a lot of times it becomes the 40 by 40 white room as soon as you say roll initiative. They blank it all out. You went through this description with the 4-poster bed and the silk sheets hanging there and all this, where, of course the pyromancer is going to be like, I firebolt the bed, and the bed goes up in flames to keep the spiders at bay, or whatever it is. So yeah,
That'll do
I
it.
think good thinking.
We do. I think we've got a pretty nice solid list of things to go, hey, from what we've discovered over the years, this is kind of some rules and ideas and thoughts. And the biggest thing I would tack on the back end is, if you're new to DMing, it's okay. Like these are things that are going to come with time. You'll get better at. The more stories you tell, the better storyteller you become, and your players will also get better.
Yeah.
At whatever it is they want, they will get better at. Because it's a game, it's meant to be fun, and they're investing in it, and they're learning what they're learning. So give it some time. Give yourself a little grace if you're a new DM. This is 80 combined years of experience still going, yeah, that's a problem I deal with.
Still learning.
Absolutely. So what have you got on tap? Where are we going to see you online again next time?
Very next thing, we're on Tuesday.
We're on Tuesday today.
Thursday, I'll be over at Indoor Adventurers. I'll be playing Hugurk the Bugbear, the himbo bugbear. He was someone in chat deemed him the unreasonably handsome bugbear. We'll be over there on Thursday, then Friday, then Sunday. I'm about to post my new schedule with this show included.
Yay.
So we will look for that on my Twitter, Graybeard Tavern, on the Twitter, on the almost everywhere, I think, though my website is very old at this point. So
I hear you on that front. I need to do some serious updating. I took advantage of a test I was giving to my students, just to go back to my Twitch page while they were testing and go through and update everything that I haven't touched. Excuse me, it says August. So this is a little dated. So I got that updated. I'm going to be on Friday night. I'm officially off my stream. Tomorrow night, I'm actually going to guest on Science Streams, who is a middle school science teacher, and we are going to talk educational theory and mostly complain about back to school plans. We have many thoughts about what the various districts are putting out there, and I think I figured out how to complain without getting fired. So we're going to talk a lot about some things going on there. We're going to talk education. I'm going to be gaming Friday and Saturday night, just my usual, my wife's working and my kids have outgrown playing with me. So I want to play by myself and anyone that comes by to hang out. And then my D&D game is back again on Sunday night. And we'll see what happens. And we left them off literally holding the bullseye lantern of corporeal force of I don't have a name for it yet, but it forces incorporeal object beings into the physical plane.
Oh,
as long as the wizard is pumping cantrip level magic into it. So it's not concentration. She has to actively work.
Yeah.
Because she's a stinking cannon.
Right.
And this gets her out of the fight now.
Right, but gives them an important part of the fight. That's see, that's
Got to keep her
that,
safe, because if she stops spending her action to pump magic into this, it doesn't work. They just got it, and then that's when they were testing it, and they lit up a bunch of giant spiders that had wandered into the cavern with them. And that's what I think I might start with and you've killed the spiders, you're all down 10 HP, let's go.
yeah.
Like, that's not going to be an interesting combat. It's just going to be boring. Let's just move on.
Well, and you see it in TV all the time. Ha! And then all the bad guys are laying there dead, and they're like,
Yeah, we might do something. I might do something creative with some dice rolls and some tables, and let them know that, well, we're going to do this off camera and determine how the game starts. But that's Sunday nights. That's a one stream D&D game right now. I'm hoping to add another soon.
yeah.
And the Monday nights are the Monday Night Mysteries. So I'm going to get out to the car and go home.
Yep.
And kiss the wife hello, because she just got off work, and you're going to head out. Are we both good to drive?
Oh yeah. All I got to do is walk upstairs.
I know. It's a little bit weird making sure we're good to drive, given that our commutes are about 35 feet, and there's no risk of injury to anyone but ourselves when we make them.
Right. Yep. Yeah. It's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't
stay here. All right. On that note, thanks everybody for popping by. Hopefully you got something out of today. The shout out is up. Feel free to follow either of us. We're on the Twitter. Well, Graybeard is on the Twitters. I'm on the Twitches. We'll see you all next time. Remember, wear a flippin' mask, and above all else, please stay safe.